Oh, hi, Benny. I was trying to find your comment here. So, thank you for the comment. Yeah, I do make that connection between the general character of Japanese culture and the Tokugawa era, largely because it just seems the most logical cause for something that pervasive and strong in the culture. And you talk a bit about that, saying it's an interesting connection to make, and ask, did the Tokugawa government set strict rules to enforce uniformity and punish the odd persons? The answer to that is yes. And also you go on about the issue of losing face in a lot of Asian society, and that it being much more prominent in places like Japan than it is in their American counterparts, for sure. The words you use here, the less you venture out, the less chances you fail, and ultimately the less you will lose face. This kind of thinking also deters creativity and having discussions. Yeah, it does, big time. We can make it a bizarre experience. You can imagine if you wanted to start a business or just better yourself in some way. There's not a lot of precedent for that in your daily life here. So personally, I don't think it's a very good thing. And I think it, yeah, deters creativity and having discussions, as you say, and it makes people at large very docile and I think easily manipulated. But adding to that also is a strong kind of moral compass, you could say, in Japan. So it's not that people necessarily understand why it's good to do something. They just believe that it is, and the generations pass. And let me, instead of just talking, let me read you something. This is from Lafcadio Hearn's book called Japan, An Attempted Interpretation. It's a bit long, but rather concise when you think about what it actually says. So this is between 353, pages 353 and 356 in the book. I'll send you a link. It's an HTML document on Gutenberg.org. So he says, the general character of the Tokugawa rule can be to some degree inferred from the foregoing facts. It was in no sense a reign of terror that compelled peace and encouraged industry for 250 years. So he's saying it wasn't that bad, right? Though the national civilization was restrained, pruned, clipped in 1,000 ways, it was at the same time cultivated, refined, and strengthened. The long peace established throughout the empire, the long peace established throughout the empire, what had never before existed, a universal feeling of security, right? That was the first time Japan was unified. Anyways, I don't need to comment on this. The individual was bound more than ever by law and custom, but he was also protected. He could move without anxiety to the length of his chains. It's pretty eloquent. Though coerced by his fellows, they helped him to bear the coercion cheerfully. Everybody aided everybody else to fulfill the obligations and to support the burdens of communal life. Conditions tended, therefore, toward the general happiness as well as toward the general prosperity. There was not in those years any struggle for existence, not at least in our modern meaning of the phrase. Excuse me. The requirements of life were easily satisfied. Every man had a master to provide for him or to protect him. Competition was repressed or discouraged. There was no need for supreme effort of any sort, no need for the straining of any faculty. You see where this is going. Moreover, there was little or nothing to strive after. For the vast majority of the people, there were no prizes to win. Ranks and incomes were fixed. Occupations were hereditary. And the desire to accumulate wealth must have been checked or numbed by those regulations which limited the rich man's right to use his money as he might please. Even the great lord, even the shogun himself, could not do what he pleased. As for any common person, farmer, craftsman, or shopkeeper, he could not build a house as he liked, or furnish it as he liked, or procure for himself such articles of luxury as his taste might incline him to buy. So you can see the regulations proceeded pretty deeply into one's personal life. The richest heimin, which means commoner in Japanese, in English rather, who attempted to indulge himself in any of these ways would at once have been forcibly reminded that he must not attempt to imitate the habits or to assume the privileges of his betters. He could not even order certain kinds of things to be made for him. The artisans or artists who created objects of luxury to gratify aesthetic taste were little disposed to accept commissions from people of low rank. They worked for princes or great lords and could scarcely afford to take the risk of displeasing their patrons. Every man's pleasure were more or less regulated by his place in society, and to pass from a lower rank into a higher rank was no easy matter. Extraordinary men were sometimes able to do this by attracting the favor of the greats, but many perils attended upon such distinction. There's a big reason not to try. And the wisest policy for the heimin was to remain satisfied with his position and try to find as much happiness in life as the law allowed. So there you have it. There's Lafcadio Hearn talking about kind of how it was during the Tokugawa era. He goes on to describe in further paragraphs how people weren't allowed to decide what kind of house they lived in or how big it was. They weren't allowed to buy certain things for their children. So yeah, it was an extremely controlling environment. And you can see how a lot of that still persists today. One of the first things I noticed when I came over here is how kind of hemmed in people are to their lifestyle. So everything's like a much bigger deal to do, and there's like a lot of kind of ceremony surrounding things. And I think a lot of it has to come from this time when it was just like kind of unusual to do things like so for example, years ago when I first came to Japan, I wanted to buy it's called the Tai Chi Jian. It's a Tai Chi sword. I studied traditional Tai Chi Chuan in America with a lineage master from China, and that was a real big part of my life. And I was a close personal friend with my teacher, who was a very famous martial artist. I wouldn't say close personal friend, but like I had dinner at his house, and he came to my wedding, and was a very important part of my life, and we could talk about things. But I came here to Japan, and just the inapproachable nature of certain things, and like, oh, you can't do that, and there's no reason why. It was so common here. I couldn't believe it. And so getting this sword turned into this just such a big deal. I just thought, like, how does anything get done here? So as easy as it is to bang your head against the wall about it and get frustrated and potentially blow your top, you can see there are causes for it, and they were instilled very strongly, very deeply for a very long time. 250 years was roughly how long the Tokugawa era lasted. So going by today's standards, that's 10 generations. Give 25 years for each generation. So yeah, you can see how it would come to pass that the entire culture would be changed essentially forever. It would be very difficult to equal that kind of impact or influence in today's world. And so you have it, Japanese culture as it is today. In my thinking, it's changing. There is a big difference between the elders and the youngsters here, but by and large, the cultural overtones are still very much there, and I think this is why. So I'll include what I read as well as a link to the book itself. I would totally recommend getting it if you have any interest in Japan. This book in particular is a really amazing resource, and Lafcadio Hearn in general is an amazing writer. So thank you as always, Mr. Betty C. And I hope that was worth watching for you. All right. Until next time.